Welcome to this new episode of the Smart and Sustainable City podcast. The Weissen Alliance is an industry consortium of 250 members of global corporations and world leaders in smart utility, smart city, and Internet of Things markets. Weissen promotes communication systems in large-scale smart city IoT networks. Founded in 2012, Weissen members have deployed their smart city solutions in major markets such as in the United States, in Europe, in China, in Brazil, in Japan, or in India. Phil Beecher is the president and CEO of the Weissen Alliance. In this episode, Phil and I discuss smart and sustainable cities use cases, and in particular, those linked to LED lighting as offered by its members.
Hello, this is Phil Beecher. I'm the President and CEO of Weissen Alliance. We're an industry consortium promoting communication systems for large-scale IoT networks such as smart cities and utilities. We were formed in 2012 by 8 founding companies. We now have around 250 member companies. So it's a global organization, primarily delivering interoperability of communication solutions for these very large-scale outdoor networks.
Why was Weissen created? What challenge was it addressing initially?
The recent history of Weissen and the standards work I've been involved in is particularly focused on the utility industry. Around 15 years ago, to large North American utility companies, Pacific Gas and Electric and Florida Power and Light, were installing smart metering networks to help modernize their grid. And I got involved in the standards development of a radio standard to allow that interconnection. And then when that standard was published, Weissen Alliance was formed, very much modeled on the way Wi-Fi works. So if everybody knows Wi-Fi, they use it. They don't need to understand the technology. They just know that they can use their mobile phone or their laptop at home or in an airport or in a hotel. Wherever they go, it just works. And Weissen's reason for formation was to try and carry that same interoperability to these IoT networks. Initial focus was the utility industry for large smart grid networks, so maybe 4 million devices on a smart metering network in a municipality. And then more recently, we've been looking at deploying street lighting networks, which provide the backbone for a city.
Right, because in the city, there are multiple use cases linked to the explosion of IoT sensors in street lighting, for example, as you just mentioned, for traffic management, for parking management, or environmental monitoring. Interoperability is really the key word here because all those systems were developed initially separate from one another.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that we've done in Weissen Alliance, we focus on that communications infrastructure rather than being application specific. You can put any application that will run over an internet type connection, you can put on a Weissen network. So it does give great flexibility. It also means you don't, if you're a city, you can deploy a network, and most cities start with the street lighting network because in most cities you have access to a street light where you will need access to other sensors. So the street lights provide what we call a canopy network of connectivity, and then other devices can just connect into that network, whatever the nearest street light happens to be.
So streetlight is an interesting use case as increasingly cities are trying to manage their energy footprint. And city lighting is definitely one that consumes quite a bit of energy, isn't it?
Oh, definitely, yes. So a couple of Weissen compatible networks that have been deployed in Europe Going back a few years, Copenhagen installed, I think, about 12,000 street lights, and they could justify the installation purely on the cost savings related to the street lighting network. So typically, a city goes about replacing the old style lighting with LED luminaires, and while they're doing that, they can install communications technology at the same time. And then business case is very easy to justify the cost savings both on energy usage but also on maintenance of the street lights. LEDs are far more reliable, for example. So that was Copenhagen. More recently, City of London has deployed about 15,000 streetlights using the Weissen communications technology.
Do you see luminaires now being more than just the support for lighting, but being really beacons for some of those technologies that could be bringing value to the city, such as environmental sensing or traffic management?
Yes, most certainly. Within a city, there is going to be a street light pretty close to most of the places you need connectivity. So if you can make a big network of street lights that provide that interconnection, then they can be the point where your environmental sensor can connect into the network, or your traffic management or your parking sensors. And the network doesn't need to know what type of data it's carrying. That adds flexibility for the future as well, because I'm sure we don't know right now what other sensors or what sort of applications you might want to run within the city. I think it's worth pointing out that you don't necessarily have one single networking technology across the city that is going to support everything you want to do. So, for example, City of London also has public Wi-Fi running side by side with a Weissen network. And they use Weissen for street lighting, environmental sensing, and that doesn't have to be a permanent feature. So if a city is looking at doing something like a survey on whether an area should be pedestrianized, or they're looking at traffic flow, then those sensors can be put in temporarily. And then on the other side, the City of London has got the public Wi-Fi that runs as a separate network because the requirements are different.
Increasingly, cities are transforming their lighting system into LED lighting system. And one of the functionality of LED lighting is the ability to vary the intensity of the lights linked to whatever, the traffic in the streets or a need for an increased lighting. Would those solutions be available then through the bandwidth that you have, or is this not feasible?
Oh, no, that's quite feasible. And in fact, there are several different ways of doing this. So as you mentioned, you may want to adjust lighting levels, and typically maybe between midnight and 4 a.m., for example, a city might want to adjust the lighting level of the streets right down. And then you may have motion detection. So if you have a pedestrian or a cyclist walking past, then you might want to bring the lighting levels up. Typically, that would be done by having sensors for the people, bicycles, other vehicles that can act directly on the streetlights in the vicinity. So it's an example of edge computing at work.
The mesh network that you have through Weissen does provide the ability to connect edge computing and to do a lot of things on the edge at this pole level of street lighting then.
Exactly. And this is one of the differences between Weissen and some of the competing technologies, is that it does allow for peer-to-peer connectivity. So applications running on streetlights or on, sort of sensors for proximity detection can communicate directly between each other without having to go all the way to the utilities back office onto an app there. So it gives great flexibility for that sort of deployment.
I've heard about narrowband IoT, about LoRaWAN or Sigfox. Is Weissen another one of those standards?
So when you compare Weissen field area network or Weissen fan technology with other technologies, the main difference is that it is a wireless mesh network, and that gives very, very good coverage, even in difficult to reach places. The City of London is a great example of this, where you've got some very, very old buildings that are made out of thick pieces of stone. So their radio characteristics are not great. You've also got lots of high-rise with glass and steel, which also affects radio performance. And with IoT, you can't just move the sensor a few meters to get a better signal. The sensor's there, and that's where it needs to be, unlike with a cell phone. So mesh technology works very well. Simply put, a way it works is if a device cannot connect directly to the equivalent of the cell phone tower, then it connects to one of its neighbors, and that neighbor will relay the message. We've paid a great deal of attention to how to keep a network safe, reliable, and running all the time. So we've adopted one technique which the military uses, which is called frequency hopping. That means that it's very, very difficult to jam the Weissen network. And that could be an intentional jam, or it could be just from interference from other devices there. But Weissen can detect and avoid that.
Yes, because for critical infrastructure, which lighting is part of, you do want to ensure maximum uptime and perfect security.
Exactly. People aren't just ignoring these networks, they are trying to intrude on them. There are hack attempts on networks all the time. Within Weissen, we've produced a specification that basically takes enterprise level security for connectivity. Our member companies and the network management companies are monitoring what's occurring on the networks. Another differentiator for Weissen is that we do IP addressing, so this is the same IP as the Internet Protocol, all the way down to every device. So there are a number of emerging artificial intelligence tools for monitoring the integrity of a computer network, monitoring intruders, looking at whether there's any anomalies happening. With a Weissen network, you can run those same tools all the way down to a device. That means that you can connect a lot of devices, you can be fairly certain they're secure.
Phil, we were discussing with our earlier guest from the European Commission about the importance of open standards and no vendor lock-in. Is Weissen based on open standards?
Entirely, yes. So we've taken standards from the IEEE, that's the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, who produce open standards, IETF, who are the Internet Engineering Task Force, the people that write the standards for the Internet. We've included a standard from ETSI on peer-to-peer security. What we've done within Weissen is take the relevant parts of these standards and distill them into a specification that is easily testable, and you can easily do a certification program for interoperable products. But as I said, everything is open standards based. Weissen doesn't hold any intellectual property of the standards that we use.
Does Weissen provide the ability to design a solution for a city that has been tested?
Yes, so that's pretty key to what we do. We've worked on these standards for many years now, and certainly the standards technology we're using is very mature. It's been proven at scale. Pacific Gas and Electric have 4 million smart meters that have been on their network for about 10 years now. Florida Power and Light have 4 million smart meters approximately. Then a few years ago, they put 500,000 street lights onto that network. These technologies have been proven at scale. We've created a testing and certification program that allows product vendors to submit their products to a third-party test lab. The products are tested there, verified, and they're verified against the standards, and also we implement interoperability testing. So they're tested against their competitors' products as well. As you're probably aware, the cellular industry goes through a fairly rigorous process of testing handsets before they're allowed out to be connected to the network. So we follow the similar sort of process.
Your members are private companies. Some of them are institutions, government representatives. Talk to us a little bit about who are your members.
Okay, so as you said, they fall into several categories. We have product vendors, who are companies who are selling solutions, be it smart meters or streetlights. We have government institutions who are mostly involved in helping us with standardization efforts, which we do either through organizations like IEEE, as I mentioned, but also we work with national bodies. So we worked with TTC in Japan, for example, to help migrate what we were doing and this distillation of the standards into the TTC. We have utility companies who are very active in looking for multi-vendor solutions. So, for example, Tokyo Electric Power Company has a very large smart meter deployment, something like 29 million devices in Tokyo, and they are working within Weissen for their planning for the future and how they can ensure that we have this seamless interoperability between existing systems and what they want to deploy in the next 5 to 10 years. In addition, we have silicon vendors. So you mentioned a little while ago about open standards technologies. We have most of the major silicon companies who are producing radio technology, and they are offering competing products to our members, which helps bring the price down, but also ensures this continuity of supply.
Yes, I do see some quite big names here on your websites, and Cisco, Itron, ABB, Toshiba, and there's 170 of them, so we can't name them all, but quite some prestigious names. Also some smaller companies, which are maybe a little more specialized on specific solutions.
Yes. What tends to happen is that smaller companies, startups, tend to get very involved when new specifications come about and help in the development and the early development of products and the testing of those products. So we have quite a range of companies. Smaller companies tend to be very agile in this space as well. So you can get products tested pretty quickly in that way.
That favors not only interoperability of their solutions, but also a collaboration when a city project comes up. These supporting companies or member companies can join forces to respond to a particular city need, right?
Exactly, yes. So typically when you're looking at planning a smart streetlight implementation, then maybe there are module vendors, so silicon vendors, module vendors involved in this. There will be some sort of radio planning company, and then the companies that manufacture luminaires as well. There will be a requirement for network management, and maybe another company will be involved with that. So by doing this, you have a city can have access to a large number of participants, all of whom have a role to play in a deployment.
The participation to the Weissen Alliance is free for cities if they want to join.
That's correct. Yes, we welcome the end user. So by the end user, the city or the utilities, because they can help us set our roadmap for the future. You know, Weissen isn't standing still in the same way that Wi-Fi has continued to progress and develop faster products. Weissen is doing the same thing. So if cities wish to contact us, they are more than welcome, and we value their participation.
So let's talk about cities that might be approaching you. What aspiration do cities have today that could be solved by some of your members' solutions?
Probably the strongest motivation, certainly in England where I'm based, is about cost savings, improving the reliability and efficiency of the operation of the city, as well as improving the quality of life for the citizens and visitors to that city. So I live in Brighton, which is a popular holiday destination for day trips from London. One of the problems that we see in the summer is there is a lot of litter around. So having smart litter detection, the ability to know when bins need emptying, that's really important. And you can't just have people driving up and down the seafront all day long just checking whether the bins need emptying or not. That's an example where it can make a big difference. So sensors on the bins, street lighting is important. If you're in the city centre, then street lighting is very much a safety concern. These are all things where technology can help.
We're talking soon to a representative from Copenhagen in Denmark, and you did mention that Copenhagen was one of your use cases. Can you talk a little more about what Copenhagen has done, leveraging some Weissen solutions?
Copenhagen initially deployed a street lighting network, and more recently they have integrated things like traffic monitoring, people detection, so you can dynamically adjust lighting levels. I think they've got some cycle monitoring and emergency vehicle detection happening there as well. I think probably the representative of Copenhagen will give you a better insight than I can, though.
A new city interested to connect with Weissen would be able to interconnect with some other cities or better understand some of the use cases addressed by Weissen members?
Certainly, yes. Weissen is neutral in all of this. We are advocates of a particular type of technology that we think works very well for deploying sensors in smart cities. But as you know, we have a number of competing member companies who are product vendors. We don't choose who might be better or worse, but we do understand what are good solutions to problems, and we can help a city with those.
One important element of this is latency of information. And it's really critical now to get information real time from what is going on in the city so that the city becomes like a living organism with sensors and able to adapt itself to the surrounding environment. Does the Weissen solutions offered by its member provide that capability of real-time information gathering and interoperability that builds up into a city dashboard that enables the city to take action from the information it is getting?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We provide a fairly fast network access, so the latency is quite low. It enables collection of data from a large number of sensors. One of the things, another benefit of using mesh networking technology is that you can have multiple connections onto a faster network that would be the backhaul network. So it's very easy to put another access point that connects onto a fiber network or onto a fast cellular network using LTE or even 5G. Data collection and data aggregation can be scaled to very, very large scales. Another aspect of this, of course, is the security and the scalability of security. And that's really important as well. How do you manage 5 or 10 million devices on a single network and ensure that every device is who it says it is?
That's an interesting one because truly one of the weakest points in cities these days is their potential vulnerability to cyber attacks through IoT sensors. How is Weissen member solutions addressing security?
So Weissen's background, as I mentioned, is the utilities and smart grid. And obviously, cyber attacks on smart grids are not new. That's a very vulnerable area. So we implement device authentication. So when a device first joins the network, it verifies against the municipality's back office system that it's joined the correct network, and that back office can also verify that that device is truly what it says it is. So we have like a passport system. They're called digital certificates. Every device has its certificate. So it It's validated that it's allowed to join the network. Once it's joined the network, then there is a key exchange that allows all data to be sent privately, and those keys are changed relatively regularly. So it's difficult for somebody to intercept messages and either do what's called a man-in-the-middle attack by pretending to be another device when it's not really that device, or even stealing the data.
So it's secured by design.
It's secured by design, and this is not new technology. This is the same technology that is used when you connect to your online banking, for example.
Right.
So you expect that to be a secure message, which it is. And then the other thing that we have as part of Weissen is the data rates and the latency are sufficient that you can upgrade firmware over the air. So, for example, if a product vendor discovers they've got a bug or there's a security vulnerability exposed sometime in the future, then those can be fixed, and it's possible to upgrade devices remotely over the air. And those upgrades are digitally signed. So not anybody can just send new firmware into a device. That firmware has got to be validated once it's loaded.
You mentioned that a key benefit for cities is the ability to address costs, to reduce costs potentially. But now we're talking about a city with increased agility and ability to sense its environment and to adapt itself as things change in its environment.
Exactly. Cost saving and increasing efficiency are very strong drivers in most cities. But if that also brings the ability to create more agile and responsive type environments, then that's additional benefit.
What do you see, Phil, being some of the biggest challenges cities are addressing today and in 10 years' time?
I think it depends where you are. Certainly, cities such as the one where I live in southeast England, biggest problem is traffic. We have great population densities. The road systems aren't fantastic. The public transport infrastructure could benefit from improving. Other cities, there are cities in the US where after office hours, the cities are deserted and not really safe for people. It's how do you encourage people to use city centres, provide the transportation, make them attractive and safe places for people to be. And bringing all those things together is a challenge, fortunately, that I'm not responsible for. Within Weissen, we just want to help provide technology to enable these things rather than solve the planning problems that go with them.
Phil Beecher, CEO of Weissen Alliance. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Smart and Sustainable City podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. If you're responsible for a smart city initiative, do reach out.